My name is Zoe Elizabeth Hart. I'm 68 years old, a widow of 12 years, and for reasons I can't quite explain, I still insist on cooking salmon for my family the third Sunday of every month. It's a ritual older than my grandchildren, older than some of the marriages in this family, and perhaps older than the love that used to bind us all together. I live alone in a little craftsman-style house in a suburb just outside Sacramento, with ivy climbing up the porch columns and a wind chime that plays a sad tune when the breeze hits just right. Elliot, my late husband, built that porch with his own hands back in '87. Every time I step outside, I half expect to see him there in his old flannel shirt, hammer in hand, whistling off-key. But all that's left now is the echo of what used to be. Inside, the kitchen is alive with the smell of dill and citrus. I whisk the lemon butter sauce slowly, carefully, the way Elliot liked it. His picture still hangs on the wall above the spice rack, smiling, sunburnt from that beach trip we took to Monterey in '93. I talk to him sometimes when I cook. I imagine his voice encouraging me. "Don't skimp on the garlic, Z," he'd tease. "That fish deserves respect." I've laid the table with my wedding china. The plates are cream-colored with little rose patterns around the edges. Mia once called them charmingly old-fashioned, which I've never stopped hearing as irrelevant. Each place setting has a linen napkin tied with twine and a sprig of fresh thyme from my garden. I don't expect anyone to notice, but I do it anyway. Not for them, anymore, but for the memory of what these dinners once were. At exactly 4:52 p.m., I hear the familiar creak of the front door. I don't need to look. I know who it is. My heart does a strange little flutter. Not excitement, not dread. Just something in between, like the moment before a storm breaks. "In here," I call out, wiping my hands on my apron. Larry walks in, tall and lean like his father, though he carries his body with a tighter coil, like the world owes him something. Behind him is Mia, impossibly sleek in cream slacks and a beige turtleneck, the kind of outfit that whispers wealth without saying a word. She doesn't smile, not really, just that slight, polite twitch of the mouth that never reaches her eyes. Emma and Noah trail behind them, both glued to their screens. Emma has her earbuds in. Noah's already playing something loud enough that I can hear cartoon voices shouting from his tablet. "Hi, Mom," Larry says, pressing a kiss to the air beside my cheek. He smells faintly of aftershave and fatigue. "Zoe," Mia says. No, hi, no, how are you? Just my name, like a line item she's checking off a list. "Hey, Grandma," Emma murmurs, eyes never leaving her phone. Noah doesn't say anything. We sit down 15 minutes later. The food is warm, if not piping hot, and the candlelight makes everything glow just a little. I always light candles. It's silly, I suppose. Romantic for no one. But it makes me feel like something matters. Like I still have the power to create beauty in small corners of this world. Larry serves himself quickly. Mia uses the salad fork for the carrots. Emma picks at the potatoes. Then Noah opens his mouth. "Grandma," he says, wrinkling his nose, "why do you always make salmon?" I don't even like it. I blink, startled. "But you used to love it. You asked for it every time you visited. Remember how you used to call it the pink fish?" He shrugs. "Well, I don't like it now." Mia puts a hand on his shoulder, her expression tight. He's just being honest. Kids' tastes change. Larry doesn't say anything. No one does. I sit there, fork in hand, the salmon cooling on my plate. I glance at my husband's picture. I wish he were here to see this, to see what this family has become. Not cruel, no. Just indifferent. Apathy that cuts sharper than any insult. After dinner, I bring out the lemon tart. Emma used to squeal when she saw it. "Lemon zesty, Grandma," she'd giggle, reaching for the first slice. But now she says she's full. She picks up her phone again before I've even set down the pie server. Noah asks if he can play Fortnite on the living room TV. Mia checks her watch. "We should get going soon. We've got an early day tomorrow." They stay long enough for the obligatory photo. Mia asks Larry to take it. She positions the children in front of the fireplace and tells me, "Come stand beside Emma." I do, awkwardly, like a visitor in my own home. She snaps one photo, doesn't ask to take another, doesn't ask for one of me alone with the kids. By 7:20, they're gone. The sound of their car pulling away feels louder than it should. Too final. I do the dishes slowly. No one offered to help. They never do anymore. I wrap up the uneaten tart, place it carefully in the fridge next to the untouched salmon. The thyme sprigs are still on the plates. No one even moved them. I sit down by the window, teacup in hand, and look out at the garden. The hydrangeas are blooming late this year. Elliot used to say they were the only flowers stubborn enough to bloom on their own schedule. Like me, he'd joke. But I'm not so sure anymore. Once these dinners meant something. Once they came with laughter and conversation and stories that filled the room. Now they're just scheduled. Obligatory checkpoints. A quiet parade of cold glances and barely spoken words. I used to be the center of this family, the anchor, the storyteller, the problem solver, the keeper of birthdays and recipes and traditions. Now I'm the woman who makes salmon no one eats. And yet, I still set the table, still light the candles, still tie sprigs of thyme with string. Because some part of me still believes it matters. Next Sunday, they'll be going to Disneyland. Larry mentioned it once, offhandedly, said they were taking the kids and Mia's brother's family. 10 people, maybe more. I figured we'd rent a van, he said. There wouldn't be room in your car anyway. He didn't look at me when he said it. I didn't ask to come. I didn't say anything. But I've made a decision, one that's going to change everything. It happened on a Wednesday, the kind of day that drifts past you like smoke. Quiet, harmless, unremarkable. I'd been pruning the lavender by the front gate, the clippings making my fingers smell like late spring, even though it was October. Larry called while I was rinsing my hands in the kitchen sink. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice overly bright, the one he uses when he's about to disappoint me, but wants me to think it's a favor. "Hi, sweetheart. Everything okay?" He hesitated. Yeah. I just wanted to give you a heads up. We're going to be out of town next week. Mia's planning a little getaway for the kids." "Oh?" I asked, drying my hands on the tea towel. "Where to?" "Disneyland." I paused. "Disneyland?" "Yeah, just for a few days. The kids have been begging to go, and Mia's brother and his family are joining us, along with her cousins. It'll be a full van. My heart did something I didn't like. Jerked, maybe, or folded in on itself. "That sounds fun," I said carefully. "You're taking the big van then?" "Yeah, 12-seater. It's gonna be packed. That's actually one of the things I wanted to mention. We won't have space for anyone else. And with your arthritis, all the walking, it might be a bit much, don't you think?" "I see," I said. That was all I could manage. "I see. Anyway, I didn't want you to feel left out or anything. It's just kind of a last-minute thing Mia threw together." "Of course," I said. He didn't hear the tremble under the words. After we hung up, I stood there for a long time. Just stood, hand resting on the kitchen counter, eyes fixed on the magnet that held up Emma's crayon drawing from last year. A stick-figure family, Mommy, Daddy, Emma, Noah, and Grandma, all smiling under a crooked sun. That magnet fell off last month, and I never bothered putting it back up. Maybe it knew. The next day, I stopped by Larry's house to drop off a pie dish Mia had left behind after one of our mechanical dinners. She wasn't home. The house smelled of candles and citrus cleaner, and I thought to myself how quiet it felt for a home that would be hosting a dozen people in just a few days. I knocked, waited. Larry called from upstairs to come in. He was finishing something for work. I placed the dish gently on the kitchen counter and glanced around, not snooping, just noticing. That's when I saw it. An open manila envelope on the dining table. Its contents had spilled halfway out, and I wouldn't have looked if it weren't for the words in bold, "Disneyland Group Booking." 12 guests. My breath caught. I wasn't going to read it. I wasn't. But something about the neat columns, the crisp font, the printed list of names, it pulled me in. My name wasn't there. But Mia's cousin, the one from San Diego I hadn't seen in 6 years, was. So was Mia's sister-in-law. And at the bottom, in light pencil, was a crossed-out name, Zoe Hart. Crossed out, replaced. I stared at it so long my eyes blurred. I backed away from the table, my fingers numb. I didn't hear Larry come downstairs until he was nearly at the door. "Thanks for dropping that off, Mom," he said, casual, like nothing was wrong, like my presence was some quaint errand. I smiled. I actually smiled. "Of course, dear." Have a lovely trip. When I got home, I sat on the edge of my bed with my coat still on. I didn't cry, not then. Instead, I let the silence wrap around me like a cold towel, pressing against my skin until I could barely breathe. They had planned for me to go, originally. I wasn't imagining that. My name had been on the list. And then they took it off. They gave my seat to Mia's cousin, a woman who, at best, sends me a Merry Christmas text every other year. Why? Because I might slow them down. Because there was no room. Because it would be too much walking. But none of those things mattered enough to Mia when she wanted her cousin to go. Suddenly there was room. Suddenly there was space for someone more convenient, less wrinkled, less me. I'm not stupid. I know the code words. I know what arthritis really means to Mia. It means elderly. It means inconvenient. It means someone who won't look good in the Instagram photos. And Larry, my own son, had let it happen. Had let them cross out my name with a flick of the wrist. I used to be the one who booked the trips, who packed the Band-Aids, the extra snacks, the wet wipes for sticky fingers. I was the one who stayed up late sewing Emma's Minnie Mouse costume the first time they ever went to Disneyland. I'd saved for 6 months to make that trip happen. But I guess I'm not useful anymore. I guess I've become the afterthought. The +1 who no longer gets a plus. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I didn't light the candles, or make tea, or even change out of my clothes. I lay in bed with the lights off, staring at the ceiling, letting the quiet press down on me. And in that silence, a thought formed. Small, bitter, and sharp. Let them go to Disneyland. Let them pose for pictures and smile their careful smiles. Let them enjoy the trip they planned without me. Because I've made a decision. And when I act on it, they'll realize just how much room I used to fill. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, eyes wide open, listening to the house creak and sigh around me like an old friend too tired to speak. The ceiling fan clicked in its uneven rhythm overhead. Outside, the streetlight cast long silver shadows across the wall, dancing with every passing car. My heart beat a slow, steady ache in my chest. I wasn't angry, not in the way people usually mean when they say it. No raised voice, no tears, no slamming of doors. Just a deep, marrow-deep hurt that sat like a stone on my chest. I kept seeing that list. My name, crossed out like an expired coupon. As if I were too much, too old, too inconvenient for a weekend of joy. They didn't even tell me. They didn't have the decency to say it to my face, and that hurt more than the exclusion itself. I kept thinking back, farther and farther, replaying everything that had led to this. Every moment where I had, in my own quiet way, stepped aside, made space, given more than I should have. It started small, like most things do. After Elliot passed, I threw myself into being a good mother, and later, a good grandmother. Larry was struggling to balance work and the kids. Mia had just started a new job, and they needed help with childcare. I offered to watch Emma and Noah a few afternoons a week. That turned into full days, full weeks during summer break. Then came the weekends, the sick days, the just an hour or two that always turned into 8. I didn't mind, at first. They were my grandchildren. I loved them more than words could ever explain. I baked cookies, told stories, mended Emma's doll clothes, built Lego castles with Noah. I gave them a part of myself I didn't even know I still had. I never asked for anything. Not money, not thanks. Not even acknowledgement. And then came the loans, little things, really. Larry needed help with the down payment. Then Mia's car needed repairs. Then the new washer. Then the emergency vet bill. I dipped into my savings again and again, quietly, willingly, believing, hoping that they saw me, that they valued me. They didn't. They saw convenience, a built-in babysitter, a soft place to land, not a woman, not a person with her own life, her own dreams, her own limits. Somewhere along the way, I stopped going to the art classes I loved. I stopped seeing friends. I even stopped gardening, my hands too sore, my time too limited. Every hour I had was wrapped around someone else's need, and I never complained, not once, because isn't that what mothers do? Isn't that what good grandmothers are supposed to be? But lying there in the dark, something inside me cracked open. Not loud, not messy, just a soft rupture, like an old seam finally giving way. I realized I hadn't lived my life in years. I had existed in the margins of theirs. I had become a shadow in my own story. No more. I didn't want to die with a freezer full of casseroles and no memories that were truly mine. I didn't want my legacy to be remembered as always there when needed. I wanted something more, not from them, but from myself. I wanted joy. I wanted color and noise and air that belonged to me. I got up at 4:37 a.m. and made tea, my knees stiff, my back aching, but my heart strangely light. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd served countless dinners they barely tasted, and I pulled out a notebook, a fresh one, unused. I turned to the first page and wrote, What would I do if I stopped waiting for them to remember me? The list came fast. Travel, a painting class in Santa Fe, reconnect with my cousin June, see the tulip fields in Oregon, try salsa dancing, learn to bake bread from scratch, not just banana bread, maybe even write a story, my story, and one more thing, something bold, something a little petty, something they would never forget. A plan began to form, because I wasn't going to sit at home and wait for their photos from Disneyland to show up in a group text. I wasn't going to be the forgotten matriarch. I was going to remind them, not with words, but with action, with something that would shake the very ground beneath their entitlement. I took another sip of tea. The sky was turning that soft lavender gray that comes just before dawn. The world was still quiet, unaware of what was coming. But I knew. I wasn't going to be erased anymore. The phone felt heavier than it should have. It sat there on the kitchen counter, mocking me in its stillness, waiting for me to do something I hadn't done in 4 years. Call Julia. I could hear Larry's voice in my head, quiet but firm, the way he spoke when he was looking out for me. Mom, I just don't think Julia's the right kind of company for you right now. You need peace, not disruption. Disruption. That's what he called her, like she was a storm instead of a friend. Julia was loud, bright, unapologetic, the kind of woman who wore clashing earrings and made it fashion, who once dyed her hair electric blue just to see what it would feel like to be a lightning bolt. She laughed too loudly in restaurants and cried during car commercials and kissed life square on the mouth. She was everything I wasn't allowed to be. And when Elliot died and I was floating in that awful fog of widowhood, she was the one who showed up with Thai food and red wine and told me, "You are not dead. You're grieving. That's different. And grief doesn't mean you stop living." But then Larry started to frown when I mentioned her. Mia rolled her eyes. "She seems impulsive," she once muttered, as if spontaneity were a criminal offense. And slowly, quietly, I let the distance grow. Julia never pushed. She called, sent cards, left voicemails, but eventually, even she knew I'd chosen silence. Until now. Until tonight, after a night of no sleep and years of no voice, I picked up the phone and dialed. It rang twice. Then a breathless, "Zoe?" I nearly choked on the sound of her voice. "Hi," I managed. "I'm sorry it's so early." "For you." Never I swallowed the lump in my throat. I I think I made a mistake. A big one. She didn't ask what. She didn't ask why. She said, "Put the kettle on." I'm on my way. 23 minutes later, she was in my driveway, driving the same battered red convertible with the peeling peace sign bumper sticker. Wind-blown hair, purple scarf around her neck, oversized sunglasses perched on top of her head like a crown. She looked like herself. I opened the door before she could knock. She didn't wait for an invitation. She walked in like she belonged, like no time had passed. She pulled me into a hug that made my ribs creak and my heart ache. "You smell like guilt and lemon cleaner," she murmured into my shoulder. "Let's fix that." I made us tea. Her favorite, lavender honey, the blend Elliot used to say tasted like flowers and regrets. She sat at the kitchen table like it was still hers, like she had never been exiled. I placed her cup down and sat across from her, suddenly feeling small under her gaze. And then I told her everything, the dinners that turned into duty, the babysitting that became expected, the money I'd quietly given, over and over, the salmon no one eats, the crossed-out name on the Disneyland list, the way they talked about me like I was already halfway gone, a burden, a footnote. Julia didn't interrupt, not once. She just sat there, her hand resting on mine, her eyes growing darker with every word. When I finally finished, there was a long silence. Then she leaned back, exhaled, and said, "Well, that's bullshit," I laughed, loud and surprised. And then I cried. Because it was. All of it. Every excuse, every slight, every manipulation disguised as concern. It was all bull. "I let them do it," I said, wiping my face. "I kept giving, kept hoping they'd see me. And now I'm just this version of myself. Someone who waits for permission to matter." Julia leaned forward, her expression fierce. "No. You are someone who gave everything because that's what love taught you to do. But Zoe, you're free now." I blinked. "Free?" "Yes," she said. "They made a choice. They showed you exactly where you stand. And it hurts, I know, but it also means you don't have to keep waiting. You don't have to keep begging for scraps of love from people who only call when they need a ride, or a babysitter, or your salmon." I shook my head. "But I don't even know what to do anymore. I don't remember what I like. I don't remember the last thing I did just for me." "Ah, then that's where we start," Julia said, her eyes shining. "You pick something. Anything. You get on a bus, or a plane, or a train. You go to a museum, or a beach, or a dive bar with terrible music. You write a letter. You take a class. You flirt with a stranger. You do something. Not because you have to, but because you can." My throat felt tight. "I'm afraid," I whispered. Julia reached for my hand again. "So was I. When I left my ex. When I moved into that shoebox apartment with the yellow door. When I joined a drum circle at 62. But you do it anyway. Because life doesn't wait, Zoe. And you've waited long enough." I looked around my kitchen. The same kitchen where I'd cooked thousands of meals. Where I'd poured coffee for Larry and packed lunches for Larry Jr. Where I'd stood countless times, watching my reflection fade into the glass. And I realized I didn't want to vanish anymore. "I don't know where to start," I said. Julia grinned. "Start with a suitcase." And a little bit of rebellion. It began as a joke, just a passing comment tossed between sips of something sparkling and pink in Julia's wild little garden. We were sitting in the late afternoon sun, shadows stretching long across her riot of dahlias and lavender, the scent of ocean salt and rosemary thick in the air. It was the kind of afternoon that made you forget things like mortgages, arthritis, and being deliberately excluded from Disneyland. "You know," Julia said, propping her bare feet up on a ceramic turtle, "if that house with the blue shutters ever goes up for sale, I swear to God, Zoe, we're buying it for you." I laughed, half from disbelief and half from longing. That house, small, perched on the edge of a low bluff, had been my favorite for years. I noticed it the first time I visited Julia's neighborhood. The shutters were always crooked, one slightly ajar, as if winking at the world. The front gate creaked when it opened, and a lopsided wind chime hung beside the door like it didn't care about symmetry. "It's too perfect," I said. "Someone probably bought it 20 years ago and plans to die in it." Julia squinted at her phone. "You think?" She tapped, scrolled. Then she gasped. "What?" Her eyes widened like a teenager finding out their crush is single. "It's for sale." "Zoe, I'm not making this up. No." She shoved the phone into my hands, and there it was. An online listing with full-color photos that made my breath catch. Charming two-bedroom cottage with partial ocean views, garden, artist's studio, lovingly maintained, built 1954, asking $549,000. The photos were just as I'd imagined inside my daydreams. Sunlight poured in through mismatched windows. There was a clawfoot tub, a kitchen with yellow cabinets, and a tiny sunroom with shelves already lined for books or plants. In the garden, a rusted wheelbarrow, overgrown thyme, and the tiniest fig tree just beginning to fruit. It wasn't just a house, it was a beginning. "I can't afford that," I said, my voice too small for the dream. Julia tilted her head. "How do you know? When's the last time you checked what your house is worth?" I opened my mouth, then closed it. "I've lived there 36 years. It's just my house." Julia leaned in. "It's not just anything, Zoe. That's equity. That's freedom. That's possibility wrapped in drywall." I laughed again, but this time it cracked at the edges. "Let's just see," she said, already tapping away. "I have a friend. An agent. She owes me a favor." Anya arrived 2 days later, wearing a tailored blazer and a laser focus. She shook my hand firmly, complimented my garden, even the withered roses I hadn't touched since June, and walked through my home like she was reading tea leaves in every corner. She peered at the old fireplace, inspected the attic, made approving noises at the hardwood floors I hadn't realized were still in style. She took pictures, measured windows, jotted numbers with swift, practiced hands. As she worked, I followed her like a ghost. This was my house. The place where I'd brought Larry home from the hospital, where Elliot and I had slow danced in the living room with the lights off, where I'd cried into the laundry after the funeral, where I'd told bedtime stories, burned birthday cakes, stitched buttons, and held sick grandbabies against my chest. It was filled with ghosts, but also with roots. I wasn't sure I could tear them up. When Anya finished, she sat at the table with me and opened her laptop. Her screen showed charts, comparable homes, Zillow heat maps. "Given the neighborhood, your lot size, and the original features, plus the market right now, I'd say conservatively, your house is worth $675,000. I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "675, she repeated, smiling. "Maybe more with a little staging." Buyers love these kinds of homes. I stared at the number. I had assumed, at best, low 500s. Something modest, not this. Not life-changing. That amount meant something. It meant I didn't have to ask permission. I didn't have to wait for a seat on anyone's van. I could buy the cottage with the blue shutters. I could fill it with thyme and salt and music. I could build something new, not just a home, but a version of myself I'd forgotten how to be. I walked through my house that evening slowly, like I was saying goodbye even before the decision was final. I touched the worn banister Elliot had carved, the kitchen window I used to decorate for Christmas with little snowflake decals, the wall with pencil marks from when Larry was growing up. 3 feet 6 inches, 4 feet 1 inch, 4 feet 7 inches, I whispered. "Thank you." And then, "It's time." The next morning, I called Anya. "Let's list it," I said. She didn't hesitate. "Excellent decision. You're going to make someone very happy with this home." I smiled, pressing a hand over my heart. "I think that someone might be me." It started with a pair of cleats. Noah had left them at my house over the weekend, and Mia, in her usual clipped tone, sent a text. "Zoe, Can you drop off Noah's shoes today? He needs them for practice. Not, would you mind? Not, thank you. Just another instruction, another expectation. I stared at the message for a long minute, then sighed. The old reflexes still ran deep. I told myself it wasn't a big ask. I was going out anyway. Besides, Noah needed them. It wasn't his fault. It never is the children's fault. I tied the laces together, tucked the cleats into a canvas bag, and drove across town to Larry and Mia's pristine suburban fortress, the one with the stone facade and manicured lawn that looked like it had been cut with laser precision. Their world, like their lives, had become perfectly curated. I no longer belonged in it, if I ever did. The front door was unlocked, as it often was during the day. I called out as I stepped inside. Hello? It's me. No answer. Just the faint hum of the dishwasher and the smell of lemon-scented floor cleaner. I placed the bag on the entryway bench and turned to leave. But something on the narrow console table caught my eye. A stack of mail, ordinary, boring, except for one large envelope near the bottom, where the words "Heart Property" were clearly visible through the translucent window. My pulse slowed. I stared at it. My last name. My house. I know I shouldn't have touched it. But I did. What started as curiosity bloomed quickly into disbelief, then into horror. Inside the envelope were documents, real estate evaluations, estate planning papers, loan applications. And there, in a bold header across one page, projected collateral, Heart Property, mother's residence. My knees weakened. I reached for the edge of the table and sat down hard on the nearby ottoman, the one Mia kept near the door for decorative purposes only. I read the line again. My house, the home I still lived in, used as collateral. Larry had taken out a private loan, it seemed, something significant. For home renovations or some business venture, details were vague. But one thing was abundantly clear. He had signed paperwork using my house, my supposed inheritance to him, as a financial security. Not a discussion, not a heads up, not even a question. They hadn't even waited until I was dead. I flipped through more papers, my hands cold and unsteady. There were spreadsheets, forecasts, phrases like anticipated transition of estate assets, secured value from legacy property, and guaranteed inheritance upon final transfer. Final transfer. I wasn't even a person in this paperwork, just a checkpoint, a milestone on their financial timeline. Somewhere in the documents was a note, handwritten in blue pen in the margin, worth more now than projected. Might want to encourage early transition. Encourage early transition. A polite way of saying, let's nudge her along. I stood, my hands trembling. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. The room spun slightly, like the oxygen had been sucked out. It wasn't just betrayal, it was erasure. Larry, my son, my boy, who I raised and fed and fought for, had looked at my life, my ongoing life, and made financial decisions as though I were already gone. As if I had no say, no agency, no breath left in my body worth counting. Mia must have known. She always knows. She was probably the one who suggested it, framed it as practical planning, forward thinking, something efficient, cold, clean. I carefully put the documents back, though my first instinct had been to shred them to pieces. No confrontation would change what I had just seen, because the truth wasn't just in the paper. It was in every decision they had made in recent years. Every time they came to me for help, but not for company. Every time they said they were so busy when I invited them to dinner. Every time they called me by name instead of Mom. I was not part of their future. I was the foundation they were already building on. When I left their house that day, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even tell them what I'd seen. That would come later, in its own way. Instead, I drove home slowly, absorbing every detail of the world like it might disappear. The autumn leaves fluttering across the road, the grocery clerk waving as I passed, the squeak of the gate as I walked up to my own front door. Inside, I sat down at the dining table, the one where I had served Larry birthday cakes shaped like dinosaurs, where I had sewn Emma's Halloween costumes, where I had watched my grandchildren play with finger paints while I laughed and worried and hoped. I no longer belonged at that table, and I no longer belonged in a life that treated me like a placeholder. I picked up the phone and called Julia. "Pack a bag," she said after I told her. "Come here. We'll figure it out together." I stood. I pulled out a duffel bag and filled it with the only things that mattered: my wedding ring, Elliot's letters, a few photos, my favorite shawl, and the soft, worn copy of the poetry book he once gave me. Everything else could be replaced or left behind. That night, I walked through each room one last time. I whispered goodbye to the walls, to the light that streamed through the front windows at dusk, to the echoes of love that had long ago faded into formality. And when I closed the front door behind me, I didn't look back. Because I wasn't just leaving a house. I was leaving the version of myself that believed I had to be small to be loved. The house was quiet that morning. Too quiet. It was the kind of silence that pressed down on your chest, like it knew something was ending. My bag sat packed by the door, already zipped. 1 week earlier, I'd never have imagined walking away from the home I'd spent over 3 decades filling with memories, tears, holidays, and sacrifices. But I wasn't just walking away from a house. I was walking away from a lie. But before I left, I had one thing left to do. I couldn't carry it with me. I didn't want to. The weight of it had sat on my shoulders for too long, and if I brought it into my new life, it would rot everything I was building. I needed to say it, out loud, to his face. So I called Larry. He answered, groggy. It was early. "Hey, Mom. Everything all right? Can you stop by the house this morning?" I said. "I won't keep you long." He hesitated. Sure. Is something wrong?" "Yes," I said, "but not the way you think." He arrived 40 minutes later, still in his weekend joggers and zip-up, his expression confused, wary. "What's going on?" "Come in," I said. "We need to talk." He stepped into the living room, then stopped when he noticed the duffel bag by the door. He looked at it, then at me. "Are you going somewhere?" "Yes." I motioned for him to sit. I remained standing. "I was at your house the other day," I said, dropping off Noah's cleats. He nodded slowly. "I saw some documents on your entryway table." His expression shifted, just slightly. A flicker of recognition, then guilt, then defense. "You read them?" I read enough. "Mom, it's not what it looks like." "Then tell me," I said calmly. "What does it look like to you?" He hesitated. "It's just long-term planning, financial stuff. You know how expensive everything's gotten. Property, the kids' college. Mia and I have been trying to secure our future with my house," I said. "The one I live in. The one I raised you in. The one I still pay taxes on." He exhaled, already tired of the conversation. "It's not like we sold it. It's just listed as a projected asset. People do that all the time." "But I'm not dead, Larry!" That stopped him. The words rang out, sudden and sharp. I let the silence hang. "I am not gone," I said again, softer now, but firmer. "You are not managing an estate. You are not some grieving son figuring out what to do with my belongings. I am standing here, breathing, thinking." Hurting his face twisted, half apology, half discomfort. "I didn't mean it like that," he muttered. "No, you didn't mean it at all," I said. "That's the problem. You didn't mean, you didn't think, you just assumed. You assumed I would die quietly, leave everything to you, and until then, stay out of the way." "That's not fair, isn't it?" I took a step closer. "You took out loans based on a future where I don't exist. You sat in an office and signed papers that said my name, not with pride, but as a calculation, a variable in your budget. I thought we were just preparing." "You were preparing to benefit from my death," I said. "And worse, you didn't even ask." You didn't say a word. Because somewhere in that mind of yours, I'd already been erased. He rubbed the back of his neck. It wasn't meant to be personal. It was personal, I snapped. It was my life. My home. The one thing I still had control over. And you took that and penciled it into your plans like I was a number on a spreadsheet. He was quiet now. I could see the weight of it beginning to settle on his face. But I wasn't finished. You know, I spent the last decade giving, I said. Time, money, babysitting, holidays. And not once did I ask for anything, not even thanks. I cooked meals that were ignored. I smiled through your dismissals. I let myself be minimized because I thought that was love. Mom. No. You don't get to talk now. You had years to talk, years to look at me and see a woman, not a service provider. I took a breath. And I'm done. The house is sold. The papers are signed. I've bought a cottage near Julia's. By the sea, his eyes widened. You what? I'm leaving, I said. Today. And I'm not looking back. He stared at me like I'd slapped him. You can't just... I can. I am, and I will, his voice cracked. But what about the kids? What about us? You'll figure it out, I said. You always do, especially when it doesn't involve me. He swallowed hard. I didn't mean to hurt you. I know. But you did anyway. And now I'm choosing to stop bleeding for people who never bring me a bandage. I walked to the door, picked up my bag. He stood there, stunned, still trying to process what he'd just lost. Not the house, not the money, me. You should have remembered, I said as I opened the door. I was still alive. And then I stepped out, the sunlight warm on my face, the air sharp with the promise of a new beginning. The morning the papers were signed, I woke before the sun. Not from nerves, not from fear, from clarity. For the first time in years, I didn't lie in bed rehearsing conversations I'd never have, or waiting for a phone call that wouldn't come. I didn't dread the day ahead or wonder if I was doing the right thing. I just knew. The house was mostly empty now. The echo of my footsteps bounced off the walls. The familiar hum of the old refrigerator had stopped. I'd unplugged it the night before, and the silence was deeper than anything I'd ever experienced in that kitchen. It wasn't sad. It was sacred. The moving truck had come 3 days earlier to take the donated furniture. The boxes marked charity, library, and church sale. I hadn't told anyone. I didn't need a send-off. No goodbyes from the people who barely noticed I was still here. There were only 3 boxes left now. They sat by the door, neatly taped and labeled. Keepsakes, letters, living. Julia had offered to drive down to help me finalize the sale, but I told her I wanted to do this part alone. Anya arrived just after 9. She smiled gently, a woman who understood when not to be chatty. She placed a folder on the table, one of the few pieces of furniture still standing, and turned it toward me. These are the final papers, she said. Once you sign, the sale will be official. The funds will transfer by the end of the week. I've already confirmed everything with the buyers. I took a moment to breathe it in. My hand didn't shake as I picked up the pen. I signed with intention, with pride. With the knowledge that for once, I wasn't leaving because I was forced out. I was choosing to go. Anya stood. Congratulations, Zoe. I nodded, and she hesitated, then reached into her bag. She handed me a small envelope. What's this? A referral, she said. A woman in your new town. She runs a book club and an art circle. Retired women mostly. She loves meeting new people. Just in case I smiled, surprised by the kindness. After she left, I stood in the center of the house for a long time. I ran my hands along the wooden banister Elliot had repaired when it cracked, touched the doorframe with the pencil marks where we'd measured Larry each year. I stepped into the kitchen one last time and whispered, "Thank you." And then I sat at the kitchen table. Just me, a pen, and a single blank sheet of paper. It took me over an hour to write the letter, not because I didn't know what to say, but because for the first time in a long time, I wanted every word to matter. Larry, by the time you read this, I will be gone. This house is no longer mine. I have sold it and moved on. Not because I am bitter, but because I have finally decided to choose myself. I spent years loving quietly, giving without question, making room for you and your family. And I did it because I believed that love meant sacrifice. I believed that to be a good mother meant never asking for anything in return. But I have learned that love is not supposed to erase you, and I have let myself be erased. When I saw the documents you left out, when I realized you had used my home, my life, as a bargaining chip, I felt something break. Not because I was surprised, but because it confirmed something I'd been afraid to admit for years. You stopped seeing me as a person. You saw me as an obligation, an eventual inheritance, a placeholder. I will no longer be that for you. I hope one day you understand the depth of the hurt, not so you feel guilty, but so you grow, so you treat the people in your life with intention, so you never reduce someone to a convenience. I'm not telling you where I'm going, not because I want to disappear from your life, but because I need to rediscover mine. I hope that someday we can build something new, but it will be on my terms. I am not your past. I am not your retirement plan. I am still alive. Love, Mom. I folded the letter neatly. No tears touched the paper. I left it on the bare kitchen counter, the way someone might leave behind the last page of a book. And then I picked up my bags, loaded the car with the only things that still mattered, and drove away from the house I had once thought I'd die in. The coastal town welcomed me like a long-lost daughter. The sky was wide and streaked with seagulls. The air smelled of salt and rosemary. When I pulled up to the cottage, my cottage, the shutters flapped gently in the breeze, blue as a dream. Julia was sitting on the porch with 2 glasses of sparkling water and a grin that said, "About damn time." "You look lighter already," she said as I got out of the car. "I left a letter," I said. "Good," she said. "Let them read what they wouldn't hear." We unpacked slowly. She helped me carry the boxes into the sunlit cottage. We opened the windows wide and let the sea air fill the rooms. I hung Elliot's painting in the kitchen. My mother's brooch went into a small velvet dish by the window. I made tea in the yellow kettle. And that night, after dinner and laughter and stories, I stood barefoot on the porch and watched the stars appear, one by one, like old friends returning. I didn't know what would happen next, but I wasn't afraid anymore, because the life ahead of me was no longer a waiting room. It was mine. The Disneyland trip had gone off without a hitch. That's what Larry kept telling himself as he drove the van back into the driveway. 8 people, 4 days, and a meticulously planned itinerary that Mia had color-coded on the family Google Calendar. The kids were exhausted in the best way, dozing in the back seat with melted churro sugar still crusted on their sleeves. They'd done it all: rides, character breakfasts, group photos in matching t-shirts Mia had custom ordered. Larry had smiled, laughed, taken selfies, and for a few days let himself forget the dull ache of unfinished business. Now, as he unloaded bags from the back, he was humming a song from a parade they'd seen. But the closer he got to the house, the more the tune died on his lips. Something felt off. The porch lights were out. The front door creaked when he pushed it open, the way it always did. But the silence on the other side wasn't normal. It was the kind of silence that carries absence, not rest. Mia followed him in, dragging a roller bag. "Remind me to email the school about Emma's early dismissal tomorrow." Her project's due. She stopped. Larry had frozen in the kitchen doorway. "What is it?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. There, on the counter, placed deliberately beside the fruit bowl, was a single ivory envelope, neatly written in a familiar hand. Larry, no return address. No flair. Just the truth, about to be opened. He picked it up, fingers trembling. "What's that?" Mia asked, her voice tightening. He didn't speak as he opened it. He read the first few lines. His breath caught. His knees weakened. He sat down heavily at the table, the letter in his lap. Mia snatched it from him. She read in silence. When she finished, she looked up with a pale face and wide, unblinking eyes. She left? Larry nodded, hollow. She sold the house? He could barely speak. Yes. Without telling us? Yes. Mia stood, pacing, the letter still in her hand. She moved? Just like that? Larry buried his face in his hands. She warned me. She tried to tell me. I didn't think she'd go through with it. You didn't think... Mia stopped. What do you mean you didn't think she'd go through with it? You mean you knew she was thinking about this? I didn't take it seriously. He opened his banking app. His worst suspicion lit up the screen. Alert. Collateral assets sold. Loan reassessment in progress. Immediate repayment required. He pressed a button, pulled up the contract, and scrolled. There it was, plain as day, secured against property, 624 Hemsworth Avenue. And next to it, status, sold. Action required, immediate payment. Maya hovered over his shoulder, reading it too. Her voice dropped to a near growl. You didn't. Larry didn't look at her. You used her house? She said. As collateral? You told me we were covered, that your bonus would be enough, that we weren't risking anything. I thought we weren't, he croaked. I didn't think she'd ever sell. I thought we'd inherit it. Eventually, Mia stepped back like he'd slapped her. So let me get this straight. You signed her property into a loan agreement without asking her, without telling me, and assumed you'd get it after she died? I didn't mean it like that. But that's what you did, she said, her voice rising. You gambled with something that wasn't yours. And now we're liable. He stood suddenly, grabbing the counter. We'll fix it. We can call the bank, figure something out. They're going to want the money now. You heard what it said. Immediate payment. We don't have that kind of money, Larry. I know, he shouted and then quieted, burying his head in his hands again. I know. The kids' footsteps thumped upstairs. Laughter, shouting. The normal rhythm of their family life thudded on, unaware that something had just been pulled out from under them. Mia sat down, shaking her head. After a moment, she said quietly, Where did she go? I don't know, he whispered. She mentioned Julia. He nodded. She used to live by the coast, didn't she? Yes? Mia tapped the letter. This is not just some dramatic exit. This is final. She's not coming back. He nodded slowly, shame thick in his throat. I pushed her too far, he admitted. I took everything and never gave back. I made her feel like she didn't matter anymore. Mia folded the letter carefully. You made her feel like she was already dead. He turned away. They sat in silence. Finally, Mia said, We have to find her. Larry looked up. She won't want to see me. Maybe not, Mia replied, but we need to apologize. And we need her help. Whether you like it or not, we have no choice now. He stared out the window. His mother was gone. And somehow, for the first time, he realized what she had always been, the ground beneath them all. And he had never once thanked her for holding him up. The road to the coast was unfamiliar to Larry, not just in the literal sense. The winding turns, the sleepy little seaside towns, the sudden view of cliffs tumbling into ocean, but in its symbolism. This was a road he'd never imagined traveling, not toward his mother, not toward an apology. He hadn't told the kids where he was going, hadn't told Mia either, not really. She knew he was heading out, but they hadn't spoken much since the bank's final notice arrived 2 days earlier. The loan, tethered to a house that no longer existed in his life, now hung around their necks like an anchor. And the only person who could lift it had walked out of their lives with a single letter and a firm, deliberate silence. But Julia had answered her phone when he called. And after an uncomfortable pause, she gave him Zoe's new address. She won't slam the door in your face, she'd said, but don't expect her to unlock herself for you either. He didn't, but he had to try. The cottage appeared like something out of a painting, whitewashed, low to the ground, with pale blue shutters cracked open to the breeze. A garden bloomed in wild patches along the stone path. Lavender, rosemary, daisies clinging to the breeze like they had something to say. There were seashells on the porch steps, a wind chime dancing lazily in the wind. And there, on the porch bench, sat his mother. She wore a loose cotton blouse and linen pants, her hair tied back with a scarf that fluttered like a flag. She was painting. A bowl of lemons, a cluster of sea glass. A cup of tea steamed beside her, and music played softly from a speaker behind her shoulder. She didn't look up right away. Then she did. And for a moment, her face held no expression, just calm observation, as if she were registering the arrival of a stranger. Then, Larry, his name. Soft, not warm, not cold. Just a fact. He walked up the steps, slower than he meant to, the weight of his guilt dragging behind him like a second shadow. "I found you," he said. She nodded once. "You did." He didn't sit until she gestured to the empty wicker chair beside her. The view was stunning. The ocean stretched out like an open secret, the waves kissing the rocks below, a sound constant and soothing. "I read your letter," he began. She said nothing. "I came to say I'm sorry." Still nothing. "I didn't realize how much I'd taken you for granted." Zoe finally set down her brush. She folded her hands in her lap and looked at him. Not harshly, not accusingly, just clearly. "I know," she said. There was no triumph in her voice, no satisfaction in being right, just tired truth. "I came also because we're in trouble," he admitted. "The bank wants repayment now." I know why you're here," she said. He paused. "I wouldn't ask if we weren't desperate. But Mia and I, the loan, the house, it's spiraling. If there's any way you could help, just this once, I swear I'll pay you back. No," she said gently but firmly. Larry froze. "Mom, please." "No." He looked at her, genuinely shocked. "You won't help me." "I did help you," she said, and her voice, while soft, carried more weight than anything he'd heard all year. "For years." "With everything, without being asked, without being thanked." "I know," he said, ashamed. "I know you gave a lot." "No," she said, standing now, walking to the railing. "You don't know. You think you do, but you don't." She turned to him then, and her eyes, clear, calm, blue as the sea, pierced right through him. I gave up my weekends, my evenings, my retirement dreams. I gave you childcare, dinners, holiday hosting. I gave you freedom while I stayed behind to be the anchor. And in return, I was met with sighs, with silence, with absence. You made plans without me. You left me behind for Disneyland. You used my home to secure your future and never once thought to ask me. Larry's shoulders sagged. "I never wanted your money," she said. "I wanted your attention. Your presence. To be seen as someone who still mattered, not just someone who existed to serve. I didn't mean to make you feel that way." "But you did," she said. "And then, when I finally left, when I finally chose myself, you didn't come to make amends. You came to ask for more." He closed his eyes. Zoe softened, but only slightly. "I love you," she said. "I always have. I always will. But I will not go back to a life where my worth is tied to what I can give. I will not solve the problems created by the people who forgot I was still alive." Tears gathered in his eyes. She walked over and sat beside him. "I am not abandoning you," she said, "but I'm no longer abandoning myself either." He nodded slowly, defeated, but understanding. "What do I tell the kids?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Tell them Grandma is painting now. Tell them she lives by the sea. And if they want to visit, they have to bring scones and stories." He laughed, choked with emotion. She patted his hand. "Next time, come without needing something. Just come." As my son, he nodded, and for the first time in a very long time, he really saw her. Not just his mother, but Zoe. A woman reborn. 3 months passed. Not in a blur, but with clarity, with color, with breath. Each morning, Zoe woke to the low, rhythmic hush of waves, rolling into the shore like a soft drumbeat, reminding her she was alive. Her bedroom window faced the east, and the first light of morning painted her walls with rose-gold warmth. It had been so long since she had allowed herself to wake slowly, to rise not for duty or someone else's needs, but because she wanted to. The cottage had settled into itself. The rooms, once echoing and empty, were now filled with life. Plants flourished by the windowsills, their green leaves reaching for light. Her yellow kettle always sat proudly on the stove. Her paintings were everywhere, stacked in the hallway, tacked on walls, drying across a sunlit table by the back door. She painted every day. Not to impress anyone, not to sell, just to feel her hands move with purpose, to capture moments the way she used to before her hands were full of grocery lists and her time was filled with everyone else's noise. There was a painting of the sea through the lavender, one of a crooked chair on the porch, and another, a self-portrait of sorts, half abstract, with wild, determined brushstrokes and a streak of red that ran through it like defiance. She named it Becoming. Every Monday and Friday, Zoe walked to the museum downtown. She worked in the archives, a quiet room lined with shelves of forgotten things. Antique shells, hand-painted tiles, old photographs, letters that had been lost and then found. She loved the hush of the place, the way time seemed to breathe differently there. Sometimes the younger volunteers would ask her about history, and she'd answer with stories no textbook had the patience to hold. Tuesdays and Thursdays were book club days or art circle evenings. She found friends, real friends, women like her who had spent decades tending to others and were now relearning how to tend to themselves. They brought her tea cakes and taught her how to make lavender soap. One of them, a tall woman named Esther, introduced her to paddleboarding, though Zoe fell into the water more often than she stayed upright. They laughed until they cried. And then there were the children. Every other Saturday, the museum hosted a free kids' art class, and Zoe, almost by accident, found herself leading it. At first, she hesitated, afraid she was too old, too out of touch. But the kids didn't see age. They saw someone who listened, who knelt beside them to admire their lopsided sailboats and purple suns. "Can I make the ocean red?" one little boy asked once. "You can make the ocean whatever color you need it to be," she replied. That night, as she walked home with her sandals in her hands and sand between her toes, she realized she hadn't just started a new life. She had become someone new. It was late in the afternoon when she found the envelope tucked between her mail and the museum newsletter. Mom, written in careful handwriting, neat, with effort. She read it on the porch, with the wind curling through her hair and the waves murmuring in the distance. "Mom, I thought I knew you. I thought I knew everything. I was wrong. I knew the woman who packed lunches, who stayed late, who said yes even when she should have said no. I knew the woman who filled silence with kindness and never asked for anything back. I knew the woman who made our lives easier, and I never once stopped to ask if she was happy. I didn't know the woman who paints at sunrise, or the woman whose smile has her own name stitched into it, not just the word Mom. I didn't know how deeply I'd hurt you, and I think a part of me didn't want to know, because knowing would mean looking at myself honestly and realizing I saw you as an extension of me, not as a person with dreams of your own. You are not an accessory to my life. You are your own story. And I'm sorry I only realized that after you walked away. Emma saw a photo of you in the museum's newsletter last week. She asked if you were famous. I said not yet. But the way she said, "Grandma looks happy," it stopped me cold. Because she's right. You look like you've come home. I hope one day you'll let us come to visit. Not because we need something, not because we want anything fixed, just to be with you. Love. Larry. Zoe folded the letter gently, pressing it against her heart. No tears this time, just breath, just stillness. She placed it inside a wooden box where she kept things that reminded her of becoming: her first beach stone, a photograph of her mother laughing, a ribbon from the first time she showed her paintings in town. Later that evening, after dinner and tea, she walked into the bathroom to wash up. The light was soft, the mirror clear. She studied her reflection the way an artist studies a canvas before the first stroke. She saw the silver in her hair, earned, not endured. The lines around her eyes, etched by years of smiling, crying, living. Her grandmother's cheekbones, her mother's chin. But most of all, she saw herself. Zoe. Not Larry's mom. Not Elliot's widow. Not the babysitter, or the one who cooks salmon on Sundays. Just Zoe. Alive. Present. And finally, fully here. She touched the mirror and whispered, "I remember you." And this time, the woman in the mirror smiled back.